Good morning. Today I'd like to talk a little bit of picking up with exiting the Matrix Part 7. It's been a little while. So we are basically living in a slave system. We've established this already. It's mostly emotional slavery and psychological slavery, but it extends to physical slavery. Instead of being bought once at a slave auction, we are bought over and over again in very small quantities. We are bought with our paychecks. Our paychecks are literally the difference between how little someone can get away paying us and how much profit they can extract from our work. So our whole business model is after a slave system. We don't have to have a slave system. We can have a business model where employees make a representational part of the profit that the company makes and still tuck aside a little bit of money for the company to be growing. We live in a slave system, so that's not the goal. The goal is to spend as little money as possible on the system and generate as much profit. Again, so the whole Matrix is just a set of illusions. It's basically just a bunch of lies that bombarded lies, psychologically and emotionally bombarded lies. We live in all modern society, all modern cultures. They absolutely know that they exist in a very small fragment of reality, and they also know that if they just spam out their message over and over again, there's a lot of people that are just going to start following it blindly, and that's what we have today. We have a few thousand psychopaths that spit out a bunch of nonsense about how everyone is a slave, and they got the whole world is following their lead to a certain extent. But people are starting to wake up now because they're realizing these are infantile psychopaths. They don't have much intelligence. They are unable to use their higher brain function. They're locked into a reptilian state of consciousness, maybe except a very, very few who have, darker ties to deeper pools. But for the most part, these are people who can't figure out the nature of empathy, who have never achieved personal power of themselves, have never been happy on their own. These are people who cannot be happy on their own anymore. They said that being happy is an unattainable goal. These are infantile people. They have not matured into human beings yet. These are, again, lizard consciousness, the lizard brainstem, where they're only occupying a very limited amount of their brain and their nervous system. They're essentially shutting down most of their nervous system, preventing most of their nervous system from functioning. And when people shut down their higher brain function, forced to exist at a lower functionality, then they have to figure out how to make it work on that lower functionality, and that's what we've been taught how to do. So it's so important. This is like the central theme of today's little mini broadcast. It's going to be short, that we need to constantly remind ourselves that we're just being bombarded with lies, and we need to not pay attention to what everyone says. So basically, anytime we go into a social setting, a professional setting, an academic setting, it's all a bunch of lies. Unless we feel really good about a genuine connection we're having with someone, unless we feel like we're learning something that's valuable truth, it's all lies. The whole system, the whole fabric and the makeup and the setting is all lies. We're taught that we have to learn things in a certain way, that we have to pass tests. We know that the Matrix tells us 180. Life is the test in every single moment, and we're constantly learning from it. So there is no one final test. We're taught to be afraid. We're taught to have one answer and then be judged by that one answer. This is a false system. Everybody runs under the system. Until we deprogram this from ourselves, we're going to have people within the Matrix taunting us for following the Matrix, as well as taunting us for not following the Matrix. So we must remind ourselves that it's all garbage, it's all lies. The whole framework is just a bunch of lies. We must remind ourselves that there is no moral authority to be had in people who do not have empathy. This is the greatest con that they've been able to pull off to date, is that they somehow have conned people into believing that they are the moral authority. Okay, we can just, every day we wake up, we can remind ourselves that these people do not have moral authority. It's that simple. Like, this is one of the biggest parts of, being free that we can do, because they have trained people to believe that they are the moral authority. Even people who are awakening and know how bad they are still believe they're the moral authority, because it's programmed so deep and it's reinforced so hostilely. And all we have to do is remind ourselves constantly. Remember how we have psychopathic toddlers running our country? Oh yeah, they run all the other countries too. That's ridiculous. We'll do something about it. We're getting there. Just reminding ourselves every single day, and infusing a little humor, a little bit of disbelief, whatever we want to do. Just reminding ourselves. It's so important, because the slavery is perpetuated by reminding us that we're slaves. So the way we become free is reminding ourselves that we're free by pointing out the individual aspects of the false slavery, because they want buy-in. They don't want to have to force slaves to work. They want slaves to work willingly and buy into the system. So if we are free, we can still be physical slaves. Bob Marley talks about emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. We can still be physical slaves, lock into an economic system, doing the best we can, and achieve mental freedom. We can be, recognizing that these people are psychopaths, recognizing that we can free ourselves as we are enslaved. While we are enslaved, we can be freeing ourselves. We don't have to wait for some big breakthrough moment. Obviously, if we can, get out into the nature and live somewhere that's a little more sane, that's wonderful. But we can live as physical slaves within the system while freeing up our mental abilities to have higher states of consciousness. We can create conscious communities within the toxic system. This is the only way that it's really going to spread in mass, is that people are going to start practicing being conscious, practicing simple logic. What we're doing is we're returning to simple logic, and the Matrix has programmed us to reject simple logic, and to basically, we have all these toxic memes that have replaced reality. So human kindness and generosity and empathy are kind of the foundation of what it means to be alive as humans, but for some reason we've been told that these are like rare, fleeting things that don't exist. This is just lies. All we have to do is remind ourselves and show ourselves, hey, look, I have good teamwork with this person. Hey, look, I'm going to open up my voice about an issue that's important to me, and I'm going to do it in a respectful way so I can get some buy-in. But I can do it. I talk about at my daily job all this stuff. I mean, obviously not all of it all the time, but I teach classes titled The Science and Magic of Rainbows. I dive into, how the prismatic effect creates our reality, and how magic and science and technology are all basically different aspects of the same thing. I mean, anything that works on a fundamental level that's beyond human comprehension. Electronics are basically beyond human comprehension. We can map out what's happening as we see it under an electron microscope, but that's probably not what's actually happening, because all the data tells us that we can't actually see what's really happening. The electron cloud is in a probability state, and as soon as we put an electron microscope over that probability state, the probability state is no longer accurate. So we don't actually know what matter looks like, because every time we look at matter at a very small scale, it changes for our viewing. So we really don't. What we do know is we live in an infinite universe, and people like Rumi are super smart because they have simple one-line poetry that says, consciousness dreams within minerals, consciousness sleeps within minerals, dreams within plants, becomes awake within animals, and becomes self-conscious within people. So we have a basic framework for how consciousness works. It's not very complicated. And then we have, the soul is from the sun, from the central sun, from our local sun. Spirit is from our planet spirit, from the central archetype of planets. And we are embodiments of the union between, the soul and the spirit, the sun and the planet. These are really, really basic, simple metaphors that we can remind ourselves who we really are and the real potential of reality. Reality is being carried out in such a finite way. I talked about this in a number of episodes, but if all of a sudden we made a priority about being visionaries and creating a new future, if that was our goal, even if we did it on a very small scale, it would have very profound effects, because when everybody's working towards the same goal, you get really good results. And when everybody's doing it because they really want to, not because they're being tricked into doing it, you get even better results. You have people like Einstein coming up with the most brilliant things. Like Newton was famous for not wanting to be around anyone, ever. He thought it was awful being around people. But he was channeling higher sources of consciousness and making it tangible in a way. So we can all be doing this. We don't have to be isolationists, and we don't have to be too obsessive about one particular genre. We can all just be bringing our spirituality into our daily lives, bringing our higher consciousness into more of reality, because the nature of consciousness is to expand. And as long as we keep expanding our consciousness and doing better as we know better, there's that Maya Angelou quote, we forgive our mistakes, but as soon as we know we made a mistake, then we must learn and try not to make that mistake anymore. As long as we keep doing this tangible practice for self-improvement, it's inevitable. There's no stopping it. So I hope that everybody has a wonderful morning and remembers every day to call out the fact that this is a fake matrix and we live in an infinite universe that we can create within ourselves and without ourselves. And I hope that everybody goes and gives themselves a hug, because the more happy we are, if we learn how to comfort ourselves and be happy with ourselves, even just practicing it every once in a while, this is the basis for transformation. Realizing that we do not need to be codependent in any way, realizing that we are our own self-sovereign entities, and that we can support ourselves, and that when we need support, we can actually call for our higher self to come into more of ourself. And this is more of the true nature of reality than anything we've been told. Any kind of social setting or professional setting, is going to be lesser than our ability to inhabit more of ourselves and discover more of reality based on that experience. All right, well, I hope you guys find some awesome meditations and have a wonderful morning.